Hello, and welcome to another edition of Addiction and Mental Health Mythbusters, the show where we try to use the facts to dispel myths about addiction and mental health. We're trying to get the facts out so people who are suffering with addiction and mental health issues can come out and get the help they need. We're trying to reduce stigma. So our job is to give you the facts. Your job is to like this podcast, join my YouTube channel, and most importantly, share this information. Let's talk about this so people can be clear on what this really means to have addiction and mental health. My name is Meg, and I am a licensed clinical mental health counselor associate. I also work in the field of addiction, and thanks to the grace of God, I haven't had to have a drink since 2008. Today, we are going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart. We're going to talk about trauma, because a lot of my clients come in with, you don't always just show up a hot mess. They usually have a history of sexual abuse, physical abuse. There's a lot of trauma that I see that goes along with addiction. So today we're going to try to dispel some of the myths about trauma, and most importantly, can eye movement actually help reduce traumatic memories? And since I'm not an expert, I got an expert, and I'm so blessed to have her. So Dr. Christine Sprouse is with us. She has been a licensed psychologist practicing out of Austin, Texas since 1987. She is the clinical director for St. David's Medical Center, Adult and Adolescent Psychiatric Services. She's also been an adjunct professional and international trainer for executive personal work-life balance coach. She is one of the authorized trainers for EMDR's Institute's regional training, and EMDR Institute for Humanitarian Assistance Program, which has conducted training since 1994. So Dr. Sprouse has gone all over the world helping people who are either have had a natural disaster or war, and she has had lots of experience with trauma. So welcome, Dr. Sprouse. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, so we want to know about, can eye movement relieve trauma? So really twofold, what is trauma and how can EMDR help? Because I have clients who come in and sometimes think that because it wasn't war, it wasn't a national disaster, that they should be fine. So how do you describe trauma to your clients, Dr. Sprouse?
Well, I think about it a little bit like this, but also differently. I believe that with the research that is in the world now, that it doesn't have to be, just like you were saying, that this big, terrible trauma for you to be traumatized.
Yeah.
It can come from something as simple as this story that I like to tell about a child 4 years old who came into me at age 40.
Wow.
And I'm just going to tell us the story and demonstrate to you how it doesn't have to be full-on trauma. Then I'll talk more about trauma. But this little girl was reaching for her father, and you know how children are, and especially little girls and their dads, they're like, "Daddy is everything."
Yeah.
Daddy, 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 hold my hand. He looks back at her and he reaches for her. He continues to be walking down the street. He accidentally smacks her in the face.
Ooh.
From that, her mind developed the belief that I am unlovable because he smacked me, and I can't get what I want, right? So that is what she has believed for her whole life until she comes in to see me.
Wow.
And we do EMDR on that, but we can talk about more about that. Then the other types of trauma, I mean, it can be anything from something as simple as that. And I don't think in any one of our books, we think that that's a trauma.
Right.
And any adverse life experience. I didn't make the cheerleading team or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It doesn't be, this horrific thing, which I happen to do all of that. I go to disaster sites. I go all over the world, training other individuals and doing EMDR so that they and their countries can continue to use it. But the traumas are as unusual and distinct as each of us is. Okay.
Yes.
How
Yes.
it's stored in our mind and all of that, how it interrupts. This is what I think trauma really is it interrupts the way that we are in the world, or it limits us so that we are not fully who we could be or what we aspire to be.
Yeah. So when a client presents, how do you know? I mean, what are you looking for to see if it is trauma? I mean, what kind of things show up? What are some common things they might say to you?
Okay, so they might come in and say, I can't eat, I can't sleep, I
Mhm.
am having nightmares and flashbacks, and I just can't continue to do this. I need
Okay.
help.
Yeah.
That may be one thing. That's pretty high level trauma. There are others which we call fully dissociative. That's a
Yeah.
whole nother story. Won't go into all of that.
Yeah.
But you can see there can be somebody who comes in because they can't quite feel like they are good enough,
hmm
and they can't really identify that. So that's one level of trauma. And then it goes all the way to having PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms. And those would be hypervigilance and the ones that I had already talked to you about.
Right.
The other interesting thing is that they may not be able to tell you the whole story. They come in and they start to kind of fall apart and cry and shake
Yes.
as they are revealing to you why they're there. So you're always looking for what's happening with this person, and
Yes.
how are they self-regulating, or how are they not self-regulating?
Yes. I know for me, one of the most traumatic things I had was a really negative interaction with one of my coworkers in my previous career. And I would dream about it.
Mhm.
When I would think about it, it would feel as real today as when it happened. And I would want to push the memory away because it just hurt me.
Yes.
And for me, that was significant enough to reach out and get some help. I mean, I was getting counseling because I love counseling,
Mm-hmm.
but it was something that she was able to do EMDR with me and really made a difference in how I was able to think about that portion of my life because I had a really negative self-perception, which,
Yeah, and it generally comes from somewhere. We talk about it, and I know we're going to be talking about the AIP model, so I'll wait for there, but it can be something we call the touchstone. So the thing that our life builds on, just like that little girl.
right.
We are looking in the environment for verifying what we believe about ourselves. Here's another instance in which I didn't get what I wanted. I'm not lovable, see, because this happened. And so
Yeah.
the more we're doing that, the more we're thinking about it, the more it becomes our truth. And we don't even know where it came from,
Yeah, exactly.
right?
That's what is so cool is
Yes.
um that sometimes it's just that awareness that wow. And then being able to really unpack it a little bit more. So
Mhm.
um
And yeah.
so here is I want everybody to be on the same page because like we said in the beginning, trauma means uh different things to different people. So but this was a really good definition of trauma. I thought it could be an individual trauma from one event, a series of events or circumstances that is experienced as an individual as either physically, emotionally harmful or threatening, and it can have lasting effects on the individual's functioning physical, social, and emotional well-being. So I thought that was a pretty good big definition. But like we talked about, there is several types of trauma. There is like the big trauma and the little traumas. So how do you explain the difference to your clients and what does that look like? Or does it even not need to be explained?
Well, most of the time, actually, I don't have to explain it, but it depends on the individual and what they come in
Right.
for. So they may be coming in for this large T trauma, which is I just had this car accident, right? So I always say to people, shields up, so you don't have to take this in. But so I
Yeah.
have this horrific accident. Okay, that's a big T trauma.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, they have had a history of maybe there's domestic violence in the family, or that there are alcoholics in the family, or that, again, it doesn't have to be something that happened to them, but just the environment in which they're living, screaming, yelling at home.
Right.
Those big T traumas, we certainly will get to them, but I like to inform them that we have discovered over time that actually the little T traumas, those are the ones of I'm not good enough, I can't get what I want, or I'm unlovable, I can't get what I want. And those seem to sway us more
Interesting.
than, yes, more than the large T traumas, which I also found just kind of mind blowing myself. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, you know, these are the fundamental beliefs that come in and start ruling our lives and what we
Right.
do and what we don't do.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense that that faulty messaging that like for me, the faulty messaging I got was if you don't give 110% all the time, you're not a good person. And to this day,
Yes.
if I'm sick and I have to call in, I have this tremendous guilt and I even know where it comes from. And I still feel like I'm not that sick. I should go in.
Yes, yes. Isn't that so sad?
Yeah.
So yeah, I find that really sad that we live a life that we're pushing, pushing, pushing. We don't even know why.
Yeah.
We don't realize that we're being really mean to ourselves. And I tease people about this too. It's like, oh, I don't have to do that or believe that anymore
Yeah.
or respond to it.
Right. But sometimes, even when we identify the messaging, and where it comes from, because, I might use like Enneagram to help come up with some of that messaging, it's not enough. That coupled, that subtle, belief system that gets passed down, kind of like my grandpa was an immigrant. So that's why,
Yes.
you got to work hard. We came from nothing, you know.
Yes.
It's been passed down along with addiction. Lucky me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm going to move on. But
Okay.
there's chronic repeated trauma, there is
Yes.
genetic trauma, there is, really, I think trauma is so many different forms, but most people think of trauma as those big T's. But what we're trying to get across to you at home is that it doesn't have to be a big T that's tripping you up. It could be a little T, which is that dad accidentally hitting you when he went to take your hand, or my grandpa telling me I gotta give 110%, otherwise I'm not a good person. So
Right.
let's go on. So here's the types of trauma we talked about. So, childhood adverse experience trauma, like I talked about, generational, vicarious trauma. So people don't realize if you watch somebody get beaten or something, for therapists listening to a lot of traumatic stories, we have to be careful that we don't become traumatized. Traffic accidents. And then there is acute traumatic disorder, which is just a shorter version before it gets treated. And then there is, of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. But based on those types of trauma, in your experience, do some do better in therapy than others? Or what can people expect?
I think instead of better, it would be length of time doing EMDR. So instead of just saying we have the one event and we can clear that up and you're done. It is easier because it's not as complex and it's not as wound in their brain and connections of their neural network, right? That may have still memories that, as you said, can't get talked away. They don't just by talk therapy. You can, but it takes just so much longer. So with EMDR, some sessions, meaning like you come in for one-time event, shorter sessions, like maybe 3 to 5. Anything beyond that, any kind of childhood disruptions, natural disasters, and then they compile, that makes it even worse.
Right.
And some people wake up every day and get beaten every day of their life. So it's like this never-ending movie.
Right.
So that person's going to take longer in EMDR. I don't look at it as if that person it'll be less effective with, and this person it'll be more effective with. It's just really setting expectations about how long is this really going to take.
Yes, that is such a key point because I think that when I first had the EMDR done for me, it only took 2 sessions, but it was just that one memory. It
Yeah.
didn't, I think of it as like a ball of, I'm a knitter, and I think of it like a ball of yarn, you know. I have some balls that are nicely wound up, and if they get messed up, they're pretty easy. But then I've got this closet of yarn.
Yes.
And if I want to
Yes.
get something out of there, oh my gosh, it's gotten hooks in it and other knitting needles and different types of yarn. And it's like, I got to kind of backtrack down all these different paths before I can get the yarn out that I want out. So I kind of think of it like that, that memory network.
That's
And,
right.
and that actually is a great segue into, so Francine Shapiro is really, she is the woman who developed this whole concept of how to help people when trauma is stored in the brain. And she uses the adaptive information processing model. So can you tell us a little bit about what it is and how it relates to eye movement?
Sure. So it's actually sort of a theoretical orientation.
Right.
Adaptive information processing, we believe that uh, our bodies are geared towards health. And so is our psychological selves. It's geared toward health. But when a trauma occurs, sometimes it gets caught in the neural network. And
Mhm.
even sometimes, we kind of wrap things around it and tuck it down, kind of push it down into older memories where we
Yes.
can't access it as readily because we've just dissociated it altogether. So that's basically the adaptive information believes that our brain creates a block that we can't get through unless we assist it with the bilateral stimulation.
Gotcha.
There's a variety.
Okay, so everybody's been like, EMDR, you keep talking about this EMDR. What is this EMDR?
Okay, so there are a lot of proposed mechanisms. We have done more research than just about any other type of trauma treatment that there is. And this was
Yes.
essentially, Shapiro started working with trauma, PTSD, as her dissertation, actually. And she already had a doctorate in English literature, but she won't go into all of that.
Because that's
But she
helpful.
yeah, yeah, that's right. Well, in writing a dissertation, perhaps, maybe,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But essentially, and I try to, again, speak the language of the people that are sitting in front of me. And different populations, I might say this differently, but it can be something, bilateral stimulation, how she started doing it was this, back and forth. And the reason she started doing this was because she had been walking in the park. She started thinking of something that was disturbing to her. I know it sounds kind of interesting for this whole theoretical orientation to have developed from that, but it's true. She was looking at a diagonal and kind of noticing her eyes waggling back and forth and how it had calmed her down. She was like, what just happened? So she did it
Yeah.
purposefully. But not everybody could follow. So she started thinking, I'm going to get everybody that can get to sit down and just ask them to think of something disturbing and have them move their eyeballs back and forth. So this is bilateral stimulation.
Right.
But what we think is that these are possible hypotheses as to why it's working. It could be an orienting response. If you're thinking about this horrific thing and you're watching these, this eye movement going back and forth, the brain starts going, wait, this is not happening now. This is happening now. I'm safe here. I wasn't safe then. So it starts to have an orienting effect. In other words, you change from that to the other.
Yes.
There's taxation of working memory, right? If we keep adding things in, like bilateral stimulation, okay, the brain can't focus so much on the trauma. So that's the second one. REM sleep is another from Robert Stickgold. He was at Harvard or may still be there. I don't know. He's a charming gentleman, but it is the eye movement, right? What happens when we're dreaming and sleeping? We're in REM sleep. The eyes start moving back and forth to reconsolidate what you learned that day.
Right.
what's disturbing or what's even maybe funny, or whatever, but it could be REM sleep. And then there's lots of neurobiological research to back it up also. So we know it's changing. fMRIs, MRIs, all these kinds of things show that the brain lights up differently,
Right.
pre and post EMDR. And so the change is real.
Yes.
And but yeah, so that's essentially what I tell people. Now, I can go longer or I can go shorter.
Advantages that I think for EMDR is that you don't necessarily have to have this really intense, close relationship where you're willing to share about this trauma. And you don't necessarily have to verbalize it. Though I do find a lot of them do verbalize some of it. Not some talk more than others, and then some after a while just want to stop and talk about it. But and Vanderkolk says he was astounded. He'd been looking for a long time for a way to help people revisit traumatic past without becoming re-traumatized. And that is definitely one of the beauties of EMDR. So
I like to tell this just really quickly is that I was up at Harvard with listening to Bessel talk about all kinds of different trauma. Shapiro was there, and Shapiro is, again, she's the one who developed EMDR. And all of us were sitting at the dinner table and talking about EMDR and about the future. And this was so many years and years and years ago. But that is something that all of us were astounded by, is that it is not re-traumatizing. It's actually taking it off of their physiological load, right? Mind, their mental energy, their emotional energy, their everything, body even.
Yes.
So,
yes. Even some of my clients who have a lot of trauma in their past, just doing it 4 or 5 times will make them feel much more capable of moving forward with it. I had one gentleman who said, I never thought I would be able to look at this. I never wanted to look at this, but he kept relapsing, and he knew that it was because this was haunting him, and it was making him behave in ways he didn't want to behave. And so he knew that the only way he was going to get through this was to actually do something about it. And this actually enabled him to start the process.
So let me just throw this in there too. I've had many people tell me that I never thought I could get through this or beyond this. And so one woman who I talk about in my trainings came to me and relapsed several times and was sent away for treatment, and would come back and go back out and then go back to treatment. And I told her, we did EMDR, but I told her, I said, I don't think you're going to stay sober until we work on that trauma. And she, which I knew, because I took the history, and she really didn't want to do it. She got really mad about it. She'd get mad while we were doing it, that I don't want to look at this, and I don't want to think this, and everything. But she contacted me, I think 10 years later, still sober, after we did the trauma work.
Right.
She couldn't stay sober because of that.
Yeah. Well, and I have worked with women in the 12 steps, not as a therapist. And when they come to sexual abuse, I was not sexually abused as a kid. I don't have any experience, strength, or hope. And so it's like, if we've done several 5th steps and they still can't get past it, I send them to an EMDR therapist. And I have one, she said this to me, which I thought was so powerful. She said, I realized that my abuser was still in bed with me.
Oh, wow.
Isn't
that powerful?
When she would be with her husband, this would always be in the back of her mind. And so, when we look at, what's her role? Well, she doesn't have a role. She's a child when this happened.
Yes.
But she said she realized her role was not letting go of it. was not
Yeah.
kicking him out of bed. And I got goosebumps. I was like,
Yeah.
wow, is that just not so deep? I mean, wow.
Yes.
So EMDR has made a big difference for her.
Good.
So, yeah. Okay, so there is so many studies looking at EMDR. And I just came up with one. This is one of many, many studies, but it was a meta-analysis. And it is 11 studies with 424 clients. And it looked at PTSD total scores compared EMDR to CBT, and that is trauma-based cognitive behavioral therapy. I didn't write that in, but it was actually a trauma-based program. And found that if you could see the slide, you would see that basically every single study showed a for a more significant reduction for the EMDR group. But the trauma therapy was good too. It's just that the EMDR did a little better. And probably because I think for some, it is discouraging after a while to keep talking and not find relief. And one of the things that I think EMDR does is people see relief, even though they're not through the process. My experience is they start to notice differences sooner than they do with traditional talk therapy. Has that been your experience?
Yes, absolutely. It's just a little bit faster.
Yeah. In the bottom.
Or a lot sometimes.
Yeah. And done is my favorite word. So of course I would be all about this.
Yeah.
So, so I have a guy underneath a great big brain, and he's doing construction because I wanted Dr. Sprouse to, what are some of the goals of EMDR when you are sitting down with a client? What are some of the goals that you set with them, so people know what they can expect? And also, what is the kind of counselor they should look for? So I have had some clients come and have very negative experience with EMDR. And when they explained the process, it didn't sound anything like the training that I had. So if you could just flesh that out a little bit for people.
Sure. So this is one of my favorite things about EMDR is that well, there's too many, I think, to tell you, but what I want to know is, one, what did they come in with? This is just like every therapist does. What is your goal in coming and why now? Right. And then I build my whole treatment plan around that. Okay. And what I tell them is that my hope, never give a guarantee because I don't know. Everybody's brain is as unique as their thumbprint.
Right.
I have no idea where it's going to go, what it's connected to. Right. Oftentimes, even if they tell me their whole history, okay. So I go for what their goal is. And my hope is that I am able to help them uncover what's limiting them. Just like your case, right? Of saying, yeah, I still have my perpetrator and the abuser in the bed with me. Mm-hmm. Well, what I want you to be able to live the life you want to live, believe things about yourself that are true, get rid of the things that are holding you back from being the person you were meant to be here on the planet and doing all the good that you can do. So that's what my goal is for them. Oftentimes their goal is simple as, I just want to get beyond this. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to be checking my windows for a rape survivor every night. I had to do this certain, thing throughout the whole house to keep myself safe. And then I'm not even safe.
Right, but that's hypervigilance.
Yeah, the hypervigilance. So I really do listen to what their goal is, and I tell them that that's my goal too, okay. and we're going to work towards that.
So why is it that, the training that you provided me is the training that Dr. Shapiro developed, and it's also the training that has been studied.
Yes,
so
that's right.
I'm a big believer, if you want the results that a study had, you got to do what the study did. And so for me, that is EMDRIA's training, which EMDRIA is the Well, you explain it better than I will. You explain
Okay,
what MJ
so
is.
there's a couple of things I want to say about EMDR. So first, I want to go to Shapiro. Shapiro is the person who started it. She's the one who decided, I want to put EMDR in place, EMDR International Association, to protect the public, to make sure that people are doing this properly.
Right.
And so from there, my business partner at the time asked me, did I want to run EMDR? Did I want to become, and I was like, the president, I was like, no, I don't. And
That
she
would
said,
be.
well, I had just come out from running the hospital and I was, oh, heck no. What I
Yeah.
want is a big siesta. I want to kind of like lay back and just do my private practice, relax, not work so hard.
Right.
Anyway, so the long story is that that's the difference between them. I work for both, essentially. I mean, EMDR, you don't work for EMDR. It is a governing body, making sure that all of us are safe and using it well.
Right.
The training that I do is different in that it is Shapiro's work. She trained me for 4 years to do it, and then sent me on all over the world. Okay, and that training it uses the fidelity and the exact steps in which she had created, which has been studied. Oh yeah.
Right.
So I'm using the gold standard actually in my training. I still use her training. Over the years, there have been some people who became trainers who really don't use the fidelity of the model. And so that's what they're teaching. And then that's what people are doing out there in the world. And in my opinion, that does harm. People don't get the results they're looking for. Maybe it was horrible. I've had people in my training tell me, I don't even know why I'm here because I don't even believe in it because I had it and it's terrible.
Right.
And then they leave saying that wasn't what I had.
Yeah.
That's not the EMDR I had.
That's what happened to me. I sent another one of my the women I work with to I said, go find somebody who knows how to do EMDR. Well, she had gone to a counselor and she brought it up and she said, do you know how to do EMDR? And he said, yes, I do. And he just did some strange tapping on her hand.
Okay. See, that's what it breaks my heart. I'm on a committee right now with EMDR to make sure that trainers are trained well.
Right.
So it's wonderful. I mean, I love that I'm doing that because that's really in my heart. That's what's been in my heart, is to help people and to train people well so that you guys can go out and use it well and have the results that keep you astounded on a daily basis.
Yes.
Every day, 35 years doing this, 35 years, I still go, I cannot believe that just happened. The change, I get emotional about it, even just talking about it. The change you see in people and the quality in their life, as I said earlier, I get calls, hey, Dr. Christie, I'm gonna live the life we talked about I could live, and I mean, it's wonderful. Or I had a baby, or now I'm married, I can, all of these things that were limitations for them in the past. And I can tell you, it has been one of the most exceptionally rewarding rides that I've ever been on in my whole entire life. I mean, it's been my life, really.
Yeah.
So I believe in it to my toes, my whole mind, body, spirit.
Yes, me too.
Yeah, you just see it working. It works on me too. I'd just say one more thing about EMDR that I found, and it's a research study that found that even when you stop doing EMDR therapy, right? So you're not going anymore, that you continue to improve for a year and a half. And the only reason we stop at a year and a half without anything.
Right.
Right? It just keeps going, it keeps changing.
And
changing, because I'm looking now, instead of saying I'm unlovable and I can't get what I want, I'm saying I'm lovable and I can't get what I want. Right. Oh, look, here's more and more. And so it starts to rewire your brain, even when you're not doing it for a year and a half. And I started to say the studies show that, right? But we haven't done anything longitudinal beyond 1.5 years. When I'm working with people, so I worked with a gentleman who had trichotillomania. And by the way, it works for more than just trauma, EMDR, but I just want to say it's for lots of things, anxiety, depression. I mean, on and on and on. The list now grows and continues to grow, and research is done on all these different diagnoses. So not just, not just trauma, but
Just so people know, that is pulling your hair, your eyelashes, your
Oh, yeah,
hair.
sorry. Yeah, okay. So
Okay.
working with him on his pulling hair, and he really wasn't dating, he wasn't doing all these things, but we got into the place where he had stopped pulling. And he came back in and he said, well, it's not perfect. It's not like there's are times when I'm still doing it. So we were going to continue to work. But he said, what I'm noticing is an improvement in my self-esteem. We weren't focusing on his self-esteem.
No. Huh.
The news is that there's lots of good to it.
There
We have to
is.
focus,
And just make sure when you are looking for a therapist, ask them about their training.
do Francine
Shapiro's
Shapiro's
training.
EMDR Institute training. But this training piece is from Francine Shapiro. Did you get trained by that model?
Right.
And then one, and then number two, are you certified? And who certified you?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Okay.
I am certified. I have a certification. I printed it out. It's framed.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Because I'm that kind of girl.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, okay. So, is the Mythbuster supported? I struggled a little bit here. I said, can eye movement relieve trauma? Well, with an MDR trained therapist, yes. So eye moving, moving your eyes back and forth, I mean, it might do something, but what we're talking about is if you want to actually get relief from some of these things you're struggling with, bilateral stimulation, which is part of eye movement, is one form of bilateral stimulation, can help significantly. And I strongly, strongly encourage, if any of you are out there suffering with something that you are not sure you can cope with, do yourself a favor, find yourself an EMDR. Francine Shapiro, EMDR Institute trained therapist that is certified. And I really think that you will never regret it. I mean, the downsides are nothing, the downsides are nothing. The upsides are tremendous. This has changed so many people's lives. And if I just can't say enough good things about what this type of therapy can do to help people find, how did you put it, achieve what they wanted to achieve or be what they wanted to be?
Yes, yeah, to do what they want to do, be what they want to be, how they want to be behaving how they want to behave.
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And contributing to society in the way that they were meant to.
Yeah, exactly. And have that sense of peace. It's, people are like, what do you
Yes.
want? What do you want? I think most people just want to feel a sense of peace. I mean, I know for
Yes.
me, that's all I ever wanted. And that
Yes.
sense of peace, when you get it, the rest of life is manageable, and
Right.
and this is the kind of thing that can steal your joy and steal your peace, and there's no need. So I just can't encourage you enough. So please go out, find your therapist, and make sure you like this podcast, join my channel, maybe share this link on your Facebook. And of course, let me know how you do. Give me your feedback. So thank you so much, Dr. Sprouse. You have been an absolute gem. I appreciate it. She's
Thank you.
probably, thank you so much. Everybody, God bless.